You guys get to see the go. The 57 people who are here right now, or at least that's what my thing says. You're among 57 people who get to see the go. Are you ready? Go. What up, wizards? It's Dev, SBMTG. We are live on Twitch right now with Thursday night's Wilds of Eldraine spoilers. You guys ready for this? Chat's ready for this. Let's see if they can correct me in real time on some stuff I probably need to be corrected about now. We got to see like 20 new cards today, which is a good, by the way, Wizards, good clip. You know, Tuesday, third Wednesday, really, we got 20 cards. Today we got about 20 cards. I like it. Feels breezy, feels nice, not too much to ingest all at one time. Let's keep that up, baby. Let's make that work. But let's kind of look, not just kind of look, let's actually look. Let's really dig in, you know? Let's get our spoons out. Let's dig into the chili that is today's spoilers. Starting as usual with the commons. We're not going to switch up the format too much here, but the commons, and especially the uncommons, dude. Wait till we get to those. Look really, really good today. So let's go ahead and dig it, baby. We got Return Triumphant here, just a 2-mana sorcery. 1 and a white, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Create a young hero role token attached to it. So we've seen a lot of stuff like this recently, I feel like. It's like 2 mana, return a thing 3 or less to the battlefield. It never really sees play, which is why it's the first card we're looking at today. Unless there's something just like really kooky you can do with this, I'm not really sure. I guess you could argue that, like, at least this one makes the guy a little bit bigger, theoretically. Unless you're already getting back a 3 toughness guy. That's the thing, is like you want to get back a 3 toughness guy, like 9 times out of 10, right? So who cares about the young hero role? At least you're making an enchantment. Maybe that is a thing. Who cares? I'm just not like too excited about this card. We keep seeing like similar effects. I was really excited about like Can't Stay Away. You remember that card where the cat's drinking from the thing and there's a bunch of ghost cats all around him? I have to do this when I do Twitch live because I can't show you the card right here. But when we get to YouTube, the card will be right here. So that card I think is like still in standard. Am I crazy? I want to say that hasn't rotated yet. I never saw any play and it looks so good. And like, I don't think this really does anything either. So first card of the day, baby. This seems really strong. I think that it seems strong to a degree, but again, we have a card in standard that was printed in a relatively recent set that does something incredibly similar to this. It's 2 mana, white, sorcery, return a creature with mana value 3 or less from graveyard to the battlefield. Never played. Never ever played. So I don't know. I just think that, like, even when you go back to stuff like Modern, where a card like this looks strong because there's more options to get out of your graveyard with it, there's just probably better versions of this effect. So I'm not too sure about it. Maybe I'm way wrong on this and the card's just cracked, but I'm not seeing it right now. So plus common, you know, I just don't expect too much from it. So we'll look at Not Dead After All. I'm not dead yet. It's just a single black mana for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature you can... I still had the British accent for a second. Until end of turn, target creature you control gains. Whenever this creature dies, return it to... Is that a little Australian? Return it to the battlefield tapped, under its owner's control. Then create a wicked roll creature token. Not creature token, a wicked roll token attached to it. I can't do voices, because then I'll screw up the reading. Until end of turn, target creature you control gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Then create a wicked roll token attached to it. It gives the creature +1/+1. When the R is put into graveyard, each opponent loses a life. This is a pretty strong version of this effect. This is another thing that we've seen probably up a billion times. I don't know, probably at least 24 times. This card, a single black mana, the creature gains this plus frosting, you know, and I think this is a strong version of it. Not only do you get this effect, which can be strong in the right deck, but you also, the creature gets bigger. That's not bad. And when the R is put in the graveyard, you get a little gravy, right? And for what it's worth, you get an enchantment on the battlefield. So you're triggering things like what, like Kami, of transients, whatever it's called, and Calyx, you know, anything that has like whenever an enchantment comes into play, you're triggering that. So for just a single black mana, save the important creature, right? That seems good. I know just a second ago I was like, this card's common, who cares? But like this is a pretty decent looking common. Again, like in the right deck, this effect is occasionally playable. depending, you're spending a slot on it. It's not the strongest thing in the world. Black has seen a lot of cards like this. I think Black has 2 cards like this in the format currently that never see play. So it has to be really strong to see play right now, but this is fairly strong if you're getting the right synergies. So I don't know. Kind of like it. I kind of do like the Monty Python reference too. You will not have been mortally wounded in vain. Well, I think I actually carry through, sir. Let's move on. Let's carry through, in fact, to 3 bowls of porridge. The first uncommon of the day, and I think the worst uncommon of the day, which is saying something, because the card's actually pretty good. There's a lot of strong uncommons today. I'm not really sure this is in the mix, though. This is just 2 mana for an artifact. It's a food. You can pay 2 and tap it and choose one that hasn't been chosen. 3 bowls of porridge deals 2 damage to target creature. Or you can tap target creature, or you can sacrifice the 3 bowls and gain 3 life. So it's a food token. Tap it, sack it, gain 3, whatever. So that's nice. But there are a couple of cool things about this. I don't think it's playable in like standard or really any constructed environment. I think 2 mana is a lot to put this on the table and kind of skip your turn. And I think 2 mana is kind of a lot to activate it too, for what that's worth. But I will say, in limited, this is a removal spell that any deck can play. That's kind of noteworthy. And it taps stuff down. There's a sort of tap creatures sub-theme in this set with the uncommon blue-white legend. It wants to tap stuff down. And there's if I'm not mistaken, there's another creature that wants you to tap stuff down and gives you benefits and such for doing so. So this is kind of neat in that deck as either a removal piece in your like blue deck, it doesn't have a whole lot of good removal, or something that gets you value when you tap stuff down for tempo or whatever. So I kind of don't hate it in limited, but I don't really think it goes anywhere. I do love that this bowl is a chicken. It's my favorite thing about the card. Chicken bowl. So let's move on to Bitter Chill, a little piece of blue removal at uncommon here. This is 1 and a blue for an aura with enchant creature. When it ETBs, you tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. When Bitter Chill is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 1. If you do, scry 1, draw a card. Again, strong version of an effect that we've seen plenty of times before. I don't think this is standard playable. I really don't. Not even really close, to be honest. But again, in limited, very often you'll play these like 2 blue mana, aura, tap a guy down, stays tapped. Very common design point to see a card sort of built around. But I do like this gravy. I really do. A lot of these, for the blue-white like tappers deck in limited, there's a lot of tax on yourself. I think that the big blue-white legend, and maybe Hilda, but I may be wrong on that. But the big blue-white legend, it forces you to like pay 1 whenever you want to do the thing, make a 4/4 or scry 2, draw a card. It forces you to pay for that too. This also makes you pay 1, so you got to have some mana laying around in that deck to do much of anything and like still cast spells. There's kind of a push-pull, a tension between casting spells and curving out and like keeping mana up to pay for these kind of effects. So I don't know, man. I will say, though, you play it in limited. I think it's just blue removal at a relatively decent cost that procs the aura theme. You can bargain and sacrifice this, right? And then if you have the extra mana laying around, pay 1, tap, scry 1, draw a card. So all that is kind of good. It plays with a bunch of different sort of themes all at the same time in limited. And I like that. So I think you probably play a copy or 2 of this in blue in limited. But again, beyond that, it doesn't really go anywhere. But that doesn't mean it's not a cool card. Designed pretty well, and I like that about it. But let's move on to Ice Wrought Sentry. This guy looks cool to me, man. It's 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 2/3 elemental soldier with vigilance. Whenever it attacks, you may pay 1 and a blue. See, more tax for this like tapper deck. When you do, tap target creature an opponent controls. Whenever you tap an untapped creature an opponent controls, Ice Wrought Sentry gets +2/+1 until end of turn. I will say in limited, it looks like you're not going to be able to play a ton of like mana sinks in the tap stuff down archetype. These all the stuff are all this different stuff is your mana sinks. This guy's a mana sink, Hilda's a mana sink, the card we just looked at is kind of a mana sink. You're going to have to hold up a lot of mana to do anything. And again, still cast spells. So you have to cast relatively cheap spells. The good thing is this guy is a relatively cheap 4/4. You gotta squint at it. You gotta look at it kind of hard, but like this is a 3 mana 4/4 in blue, which is really sweet. And not only that, but it's a 3 mana 4/4 that like when it becomes a 3 mana 4/4, you also get tempo. That ain't bad. I don't think, again, I'm not sure this is like really worth playing in Standard. At 3 mana, I think that the decks that might want this, like Mono Blue, already have like Haughty Jin. You know, I don't think this sees play. Mostly because this is a triggered ability you have to pay mana for. And I don't think you want to do that in Standard so much. So I don't love it there, even though it's a blue 3 mana 4/4. You know, it's not terrible. It really isn't. But again, in Limited, we're seeing the pieces form for this particular archetype, and I kind of like what I see a little bit, although it does look a little bit mana intensive. Remember that. But still, I think it might be worth it in a lot of cases to run this guy. It's a cool dude. Tempo on a 4/4, like for a cheap cost, like, yeah, let's go. It's nice. But we're looking at Soul Guide Lantern next. Sideboard playable in Standard, just a single mana for an artifact. When it ETBs, exile target card from a graveyard, tap, sack, exile each opponent's graveyard, pay 1, tap it, sacrifice it, draw a card. Stop me if you've heard this one before. That's because you definitely have. This is a card. So, it's, always sideboard playable. Great in formats that care about graveyards, and Standard kind of does right now with all the, the various Reanimator decks that you might come across. So I like it. I've always liked eggs like this, just a single mana, that can do a thing and then also tap to draw a card. Always decent. Always a good, option to have in Standard. Even though that we actually have some kind of a lot of graveyard hate in Standard that's been hit or miss. A lot of it miss, Soulless Jailer and all that stuff. I think that's the name of the card. Just has not really succeeded. None of them have, but the cards like this have always been kind of a good standby. So I'm sure this will see play in the 15, if you know what I mean. But let's move on to Ashiok's Reaper. This is 4 mana, 3 and a black for a 3/3 Nightmare. Check out this text box. Whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. Yes, beautiful. This is an effect that I've been waiting my entire life for. We've got so many enchantresses that are like, whenever one comes into play under your control, draw a card. We got like 50 of those, man. At least half a dozen of those, in different styles and flavors. But I don't know how many of these we've ever really had. Maybe there's something akin to this in like Theros or something. But there's not a whole lot of redundancy with this exact effect, and that I'm pretty excited about this. I don't think it's really playable in Standard. I think 4 mana, Hill Giant stats, and 4 mana 3/3. I don't think that that's really exciting when you're comparing this to like Sheldred, the Wandering Emperor, and even other black cards like Sorin. I think I'd rather play Sorin around the world than this in most Standard decks. But in Commander, I think this could be a pretty popular Commander card and maybe even open up some avenues in Enchantress decks that we're not super used to. So I'm really excited about this. It's kind of right in the middle of the uncommons today. And after this, we'll start seeing some really bomb uncommons that are amazing. But I think this is kind of interesting. Again, priced out of Standard, but in a format like Commander where it's all about setup and payoff, yeah, I could really see this dude putting in some like real actual labor for the party, but let's move on. Anti-enchantment hate. It is whenever an enchantment you control. I wish it was just whenever an enchantment's put in the graveyard from the battlefield. That would be pretty cracked, but I don't think it would be too powerful at 4 mana though. I think you could print that card at 4 mana. It might be fine, but still, I will. This is one little wrinkle before we move on. This is a wrinkle. One correction I need to issue that I knew it worked this way, so I shouldn't have worded it exactly the way that I worded it. But I think in yesterday's video, I said that once a roll is on a creature, you can't put another roll on that creature. You actually can. There's not a lot of use cases where you'd want to, right? But you can put another roll on a creature that already has a roll. You just discard the previous roll. You can only have one roll at a time, right? So you can put multiple rolls on a creature. You just have to discard the previous one. That's where in draft, a card like this comes in, because this will let you, you put multiple rolls on a creature, one falls off, and you actually benefit from that interaction. So definitely something worth pointing out right there. There's a reason why you'd want to stack multiple rolls and get rid of one. But just in Commander, I think this is pretty sick. I think this is probably, it goes with Saga as well. Good pull on that. It goes very, very well with Sagas, yes. So I think it could be a sexy little card, dude. I like it a lot. We'll move on to the Princess Flies Away. It's her party, and she'll fly if she wants to. It's 3 mana 2 and a white for a Saga. Weird. Look at that. Synergy, just a single what, Dev? On chapter 1, you exile up to 1 target creature. A single creature. On chapter 2, target creature you control gets +2/+2, gains flying till end of turn. That's why it's called that. And then on chapter 3, you return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control. This is pretty sweet with bargain, isn't it? Right? Am I crazy? You can exile the creature, give one of your dudes +2/+2, and then on that same turn, where all your mana's open and stuff, you can sacrifice this for bargain. Or sacrifice it to some other effect. And then the thing you exiled is just gone forever. You know, you could also blink your own guy with this, but I look at this as kind of like a soul partition. You know, it's going to keep a creature gone for a couple of turns while you do your business and try to aggro your opponent out. And like chapter 2 lets you try to aggro your opponent out. I don't know if 3 mana is too much, right? I think you might just rather play like Brutal Cathar in an aggro deck, but this could still work. Still a very powerful looking card if you have the right synergies. And even if you don't have a way to like toss this thing in the trash like halfway through its life cycle, I still think you got options with it. You know, just being able to remove a dude for a couple turns might do the thing you want to do. You know, like on turn 3, I play this, exile your guy. On turn 4, I have all my mana open. One of my dudes can get through for a fair amount of damage, and I've got all this mana untapped. On 4, right? That's your guy doesn't come back till turn 5. It seems good. But on turn 4, I can Wandering Emperor. I can play like 2 drops to invalidate your dude when he does come back or whatever. I do like this. I think it's a hurdle for aggro decks to actually want to play this at 3 mana. But at least it affects the board state. Chapter 2 is great and leaves all your mana open. So this is a really interesting card to look at. And again, Commander players might like something like this, but hard to say. 3 mana exile up to 1 target creature is just kind of a good rate in and of itself. And then everything that you get beyond that, like the second chapter, is just kind of fine. 3 mana exile a creature at sorcery speed probably wouldn't be playable necessarily, but with all this other extra stuff that you get and just the fact that it has the card type that it has. Like, yeah, probably a very good card. Really interesting to think about, too. Yeah, cool draft card. Decent for blink strategies, yep. Whether you're blinking your own creatures with it or you're blinking it, right? Because this is actually a sweet, mode on it, too. Is that if you blink it, the creature that you initially exiled never comes back, and you just get to exile another guy. Like, that seems, slightly busted, I'm just going to say. So it's just a really, really neat card. Good design on this, and just good design on a lot of these cards so far. I like the flavor. I said yesterday I didn't get the flavor on Agatha's Cauldron, and then while I was editing the video, I was like, oh, you put the soul in the cauldron, and then somebody drinks the liquid from the cauldron, and they get the ability. It makes perfect sense, idiot. And then like everyone in the comments was trying to tell me that once the video uploaded, which is fine because it's good engagement. So let's move on to Siphon Ego. A single black mana for a sorcery. Target player reveals their hand. Stop me if you've heard this one before. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Then exile a card from your hand if you don't control a fairy. So if you control a fairy, it's Thoughtseize. And if you don't control a fairy, it's that thing from a couple of sets ago everyone already forgot the name of and no one ever played. It's that thing. Remember that? You exile a card from your hand and you get a card from their hand, and it's just terrible. Because you're down a card. It's just not good. Now, this is just better Thoughtseize when you do have a fairy, and we've already seen a 1-drop black fairy in this set. We know that at least one's going to exist, so like maybe playable in standard, but you're never playing it on turn 1. But Thoughtseize is good beyond turn 1. Everyone has this idea that turn 1 Thoughtseize is like the only way Thoughtseize is good. Thoughtseize is good all year round. Really, you can eat it in fall, with a nice little slice of pumpkin pie with some whipped cream. You can eat it in the summer with a popsicle. It's fun. Thoughtseize is good pretty much no matter what turn you play it on, so long as your opponent has cards they're holding on to and they want to play. So this is probably just as fine in standard, let's say, on like turn 3 as Thoughtseize would be. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that it's still not a safe card. This is going to be really annoying for this card to exist, man. Really, really is. I guess maybe someone, if you had 1 fairy on the table, someone could remove it in response and you'd have to exile a card from your hand. I'll also say if this is the last card in your hand, doesn't matter if you control the fairy or not. So there's that, I guess. I should point that out. But Yeah, just weaker Thoughtseize is not always playable, right? We've seen it not be playable in the past, but this looks pretty good. And by the way, there's a modern fairies deck too. There's a modern blue-black fairies deck that I don't know if it's still relevant or not, but just having like Spell Stutter Sprite and Siphon Ego like seems kind of scary, you know? So I'm gonna go ahead and just call this a good card. Pretty decent, you know? Joke's on you. My hand is full of nothing but land. Always. It's true. That can be true, Boogeyman Fox. But you know us, we never draw land. So I guess we got a buttload of cards in our hand too because we can't play the cards in our hands. We never drew land. But yeah, this is obviously a good card. It's obviously supposed to create Thoughtseize discourse. I ain't getting involved in it. It's a good card. Let's move on to what I believe is our final uncommon of the day, or at least in the cards that I prepared for this video. There's a couple more to look at that are newer than me creating this folder that we'll get to towards the end. But if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Gadwick's first duel is the final uncommon that I prepared. Now, that might give you the impression I think it's better than Thoughtseize, Fairy Thoughtseize. I don't think that, but I do think it's more interesting, and I think it's like, you know, the last card we just saw, I already forgot the name of it. I'll just call it Thoughtseize. This card's like Thoughtseize. We just looked at it. I forgot the name of it. What's it called? Siphon Ego. Okay, I'm sure I'll remember it eventually, but you know, cards have to prove themselves to me before I remember their names. Whereas Gadwick's first duel, this is a really interesting saga. It's just something we don't see every day, and so I wanted to cover it last in the uncommons because I'm interested in it. It's 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a saga. On chapter 1, create a cursed roll token attached to up to 1 target creature. If you control another roll on it, put the 1 into the graveyard. Enchanted creature is 1/1. That's a cursed roll token. On chapter 2, you scry 2. Already. Okay. On chapter 3, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell with mana value 3 or less this turn, copy that spell. Choose new targets for the copy if you feel like it. So this, man, for just 2 mana, you get a removal spell that's a little bit like a witness protection or a frogify or something. They don't become a legitimate business person, but you know, they're selling stuff on the side of the road. It's a little 1/1 guy. And then on chapter 2, you scry 2. And again, I think for 2 mana, frogify, well, I mean, it's a forever frogify, whatever you want to. There's like 50 of those. Just pick which one you want to call it. We'll just call it witness protection. For 2 mana, you get that, and then scry 2 on the next turn. That's kind of already good. And you cast an enchantment, and you have a permanent in play that you can sacrifice or bargain or whatever. You know, there's a bunch of stuff you might be able to do with this. Proc enchantment triggers, whatever, you know. And then this is actually really good. Double up a removal spell, double up a draw spell. Like, ooh, that's actually pretty good. There's multiple things in Standard right now that are kind of spells-based attackers that say whenever you cast or copy a spell, it gets, you know, a little bonus, a little prowessy thing. Papa. So this is pretty sweet with that too, you know, with those guys. I just really, I like this, man. The turn that you get chapter 3, you have all your mana untapped, right? So I just feel like you can do some blowout stuff with this. Okay, you play it on 2, you have 2 mana, 3, 4 mana on the turn that it goes off, theoretically. If you drop a land every turn, that's 4 mana on the turn it goes off. So if you cast a 3-drop, you still have a mana left to play around with. Just seems very, very good to me, man. You could even just cast like a 2-drop spell. If you have the 4 mana, you could cast, say, Go for the Throat or something like that and leave up, make disappear, negate, blah, blah. And that just seems like a beating too. And you get to scry in the middle of it to get to the stuff you want. Like, come on, man. This card actually looks like fairly strong to me. So I don't know, man. I think this is one of the more intriguing uncommons of the day. But I also think outside of like the theory crafting and, oh, look at this new different thing. Like, I actually think this could just be strong on like a baseline level, you know? Oh, by the way, I want to point this out too. It's up to 1 target creature, so you don't have to target your own guys if your opponent doesn't have creatures to target. Just altogether, I think this is a card to look out for, man. It does an awful lot. It really does. But we'll move on to the rares from today. Here's Cedric A. Phillips rare. I love Cedric, man. This is Redcap Gutter Dweller. I hate that he got like the, you know, technically the worst rare of the day, at least in my mind. Who knows? This could be incredible, you know, but I like Cedric. I like when he gets cards and we hear from him and all that. So let's look at Redcap Gutter Dweller. It's 4 mana, 2 and 2 red for a 3/3 Goblin Warrior with Menace. When Redcap Gutter Dweller enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 black rat creature tokens with the creature can't block. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Redcap Gutter Dweller and exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So not quite Siege Gang Commander, right? But still pretty neat. 4 mana for a 3/3 Menace, not great, but you get 5/5 worth of stats for your 4 mana. I typically do like that. But you have to wait till your next upkeep for a thing to come around. You have to sacrifice a creature to get the bonus on this. It does get a counter, and the best thing about it is that you draw a card the red way. That is pretty great, and you'll have all your mana untapped on that turn, but has to survive. That said, I guess if it does get hit by a removal spell or something before you can draw a card off of it, then it still leaves behind the 2 1/1s, you know? So just because this is kind of the first rare that I wanted to feature today doesn't mean I think it's a terrible card, but I think that at 4 mana in red, there's probably better stuff you could be playing. In aggro, you're playing Thundering Raiju if you're playing 4 drops at all, you know. In big red, you're playing Urabrask, perhaps, what is his name? Wow, oh my goodness. He's been in Magic for like 50 years. The 4 mana red Planeswalker. There's actually 2 4 mana red Planeswalkers because Jaya looks really good too. But again, I think that he's in an awkward spot at 4 mana, right? So there is that, but I don't hate him. I think that he's like, there's an argument for him in Commander, you know. I think this is one of those where he's rare, mostly because he's good on rate. Like, he's not a bad looking card, but also because of draft. You know, like in Limited, there's the Rats archetype, and this guy's busted in the Rats archetype. He's very good there. So I don't think this is a bad Magic card. I really don't, but I think it's going to struggle to kind of find a place in Standard. Look at him eating that block of cheese. How charming. He's a good dude. He's a good dude. But anyway, Koth. That's his name. Koth. I love King of the Hill, so I probably should remember that guy's name is Koth. Anyway, thanks for the prime sub, Dankful 420. It's a great name. Let's move on to the Apprentices Folly here. I feel like they just made this card. I feel like they just came up with this card like 2-3 weeks ago. Like, because they banned Fable of the Mirror Breaker, they were like, "Whoa, there's got to be something that we can do." So this is what they chose, but probably not. Apprentices Fallacy? It's not even a word. Apprentices Folly is 4 mana, 2, a blue, and a red for a saga. On chapters 1 and 2, you choose target non-token creature you control that doesn't have the same name as a token you control. Basically, you can't make the same token twice. Create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it isn't legendary, is a reflection in addition to its other types, and has haste. On chapter 3, you sacrifice all the reflections that you control. So I don't know if they wanted this to work with the Fable of the Mirror Breaker because it made reflection tokens and stuff. Or, again, if they banned Fable and they were like, let's print a card that's kind of like it, and it does the thing, but it doesn't make treasure or like a thing. I don't know, man. It feels weird to me. All things considered, though, I think it's cool. On the floor, it's a clone, right? A 4 mana, clone one of your own guys. That's it. On the second turn, you get to do it again. Really noteworthy that the thing isn't legendary, so you can probably do some really busted stuff with some legendary like 3 drops in Standard. If you want to do it on curve, you don't have to do it on curve. You can just like copy your Shelly twice if that's what you want to do. It seems gross, you know. So that seems okay too if that's really what you want to do. But altogether, this is another one I'm not sure about, but I'm becoming more sure about cards as we move through the rares, right? Like, this does look like there's probably really powerful stuff you could do with it. So I don't know, man. I kind of like it. I like the name of it, and the name of it kind of makes me want the art to just be like Mickey with the wizard hat. You know, is that what this is supposed to be? That story? That's what this really just is supposed to be Magic the Gathering Lorcana, isn't it? People are accusing you that now. I think you might be doing it. I guess this story was a thing before Fantasia existed. But again, that's what I want the art to be. Someone will commission that altar at some point. You'll see it on Twitter. But let's move on after I hit the cough button. Yeah, bargain the second chapter and keep the tokens. I was going to get to that eventually. A lot of these sagas appear to be meant to be bargained. you know? I really like that about them. So pretty sick. And Bargain is a really good mechanic. Bargain seems like it's going to end up being a super strong, like constructed playable mechanic. So stuff like this, you could easily bargain. I guess you have to have like an instant speed bargain thing, but no, you don't. No, you don't, because you just like let chapter 2 go off and then bargain it at that turn. Don't be silly, Devin. Understand timing and sequencing. Let's move on to Ingenious Prodigy. I love this thing, man. This is X and a blue. I guess they'll grow into the glasses and the hat and the robe. We didn't have any clothes for kids in the Wizards Guild. Most of the wizards aren't kids. We didn't know what to do. So it's an X and a blue for a 0/1 human wizard with Skulk. Neat. Ingenious Prodigy enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Ingenious Prodigy has one or more +1/+1 counters on it, you can remove one of them counters and draw a card. Really, really neat thing. If you forgot what Skulk does, by the way, the thing can't be blocked by creatures with greater power than it. So if you make this like a 6/6 in the late game or something like that, then, you know, they can't block it with big boys. Or make a 4/4. They can't block it with 5/5s. It's not bad. Obviously, you want to make it like a 1/1 or a 2/2 so it can't be blocked. But that's not even true in this case. In this case, you want to make it a 6/6. They'll end up drawing you like 6 cards throughout the course of the game. You could argue this is a one-sided Howling Mine that scales and becomes a win condition in the late game. And if you made that argument, I'd agree with you. I think that's a good argument. I don't really feel like debating. It seems fine. My only thought on that is that it is probably a bit slow and it can pretty easily die before you get to draw a card off of it. I counter with that. Is that good enough? I'm not actually sure. This thing looks sweet, man. Again, maybe a commander card. This looks like, I mean, it's only an extra card every turn, right? But it's a whole lot of them throughout the game if they don't remove it, and they probably have a better removal target on the table. I don't know. It's Commander. Everyone's playing busted stuff, but everyone's Dave Matthews and they're playing busted stuff. It was Dave Matthews' album. No one remembers that. But anyway, I don't get your references. Ingenious Prodigy, though. Again, I will go back to your original argument that you were debating me on. The fact that in Standard even, this is Hydroid Crasisy. They keep trying to fix Hydroid Crasis, don't they? In this set, this can be like a 6/6 in the late game. This can just be a 6/6, you know, and it's a 5/5 by the time it gets to attack, but like still attacking with a 5/5 that drew you a card. Okay, I struggle to dislike this. I can see a Standard where this is actually kind of a playable card, and I kind of think it's super playable in Commander. I think people are going to really like it there. Not just because of the function, but like, look at it. Come on. It's adorable. So I think that's true too. And I can't remember too many blue creatures. There are blue spells like Mass Manipulation, and like we'll see one in just a second. There's Dominate. There's blue spells that scale X, right? But I can't think of a whole lot of blue creatures that scale to X, especially just for, you know, 1 blue mana in X. So that might be kind of newish, you know. Just altogether, I really, really like this card. I spent too long on it, but I really want to hammer home how much I like this thing. It seems awesome to me. Just a really cool card, man. But let's move on. Oh, I keep saying 6/6, 7/7. It'll always have an extra point of toughness, and it's powered. Look, it's dev talk. It's dev speak. I should never refer to myself in the third person. That made me feel gross. But let's move on. Because if you've been with the channel long enough, you know what I mean. Let's move on to Extraordinary Journey here. This card looks really, really cool to me for a lot of reasons. 2 blue mana and double X, kind of poopy, for an enchantment. When it ETBs, exile up to X target creatures. For each of those cards, its owner may play them for as long as they remain exiled. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures enter the battlefield, if 1 or more of them entered from exile or was cast from exile, you draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, okay, where to begin with this thing? It is a bad removal spell, but I guess it is a removal spell, you know? It's 4 mana to remove 1 guy. We've already talked about one like Soul Partition-y kind of card tonight. This is another. It's like a really bad Soul Partition, but I imagine there are times where you're sweating. You're sweating hard. And you're going to use this as the removal spell. Just single target removal spell, 4 mana, and then it stays on the battlefield, which is kind of the important part. Because when your opponent does replay those guys, you get to draw a card, which is kind of sick. They have to spend mana again, okay? They don't like doing that. And you get to draw a card. That's not bad. For 6 mana, it gets 2 guys. For 8 mana, it gets 3 guys. So it does scale throughout the game. That could be worth it. Obviously, you get your own guys with this. You can get your own guys with this, replay them for ETB triggers and drawing cards. But importantly, this also works with adventure creatures, right? Again, whether it's standard or commander or whatever, historic, where there's a lot more available adventures to play with. Like people actually do play like Bone Crusher stuff still. So really interesting there where you can just play it for like 2 blue mana, no X whatsoever. Throw it onto the table, and then just incrementally draw cards, whether it's off your opponent playing adventure creatures from exile or you playing adventure creatures from exile. So I think this is kind of really neat. There's like multiple modes on it. There's the I want to repeat ETB triggers mode. There's the, save my guys for a couple of turns and then like cast a sweeper on the next turn and then start casting my guys again. There's that kind of safety mode on it. There's remove your guys for a turn or 2 and make you repay mana and draw cards. There's just play it for 2 mana. So there's like 4 different modes on this card. And I think they're all really neat. It scales too. I've already said that, but again, I should point out that it does scale into the late game. If you want to save multiple dudes or get rid of multiple of their guys, really not terrible. And it's an enchantment. It can be bargained. It triggers enchantment stuff, coming into play or being cast from your hand or whatever. So knock yourself out in terms of all that stuff triggering. So really, really neat. A lot of cool stuff about this card. Not really sure how standard playable it actually is, if I'm being honest with you. Now, in other formats, there are other ways to play things from exile, which I think is important. So there's that, especially in Commander, where you've got access to all the ways to ever cast something from exile, So that's kind of neat. But altogether, I just think this is a really, really well-designed card, So love it. Love the card. But the blue meat hook, I guess you could look at it that way. If blue was going to have a meat hook, it'd be this card. But let's move on to Talion's Messenger, because they just keep fixing cards that already exist in Standard. You saw the fixed wedding announcement. This is a fixed Rafine. It's 2 and a blue for a 1/3 fairy noble with flying. Whenever you attack with 1 or more fairies, draw a card, then discard a card. When you discard a card this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target fairy you control. So let's not beat on this card too much for not being Rafine, because it isn't legendary, and it's easier to cast. Checkmate. So it can be hit with lightning strike, I guess. It doesn't have the ward. It can't trigger more than once a turn. So it's a lot of kind of bad stuff about this card. But I guess if there's a fairies deck in Standard, the card instantly gets much, much better, because it may not trigger like for every attacking creature. God, Rafine is busted. So good. But this is a super connive. You can discard a land and still get the +1/+1 counter. That's not bad. So, again, if there's a fairies deck, I like this. And again, I especially like that it's not legendary. That is one thing it's got over Rafine. So, it is a sweet card. If Rafine never existed, I think we'd be looking at this like, ooh, Rafine does exist. So we're like, I don't know. Fairy Tribal is kind of shaping up. It's not doing bad. I'm not sure that I'm supposed to say that fairy theme. I really don't want to alienate anyone. So like fairy theme deck, whatever. The fairy deck is coming together and it's looking okay. But Lord Skidder Sewer. I always want to say Skewer. Lord Skidder Skewer King. It's the Sewer King. Is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 3/3 legendary rat noble. Whenever another rat enters the battlefield under your control, exile up to 1 target card from an opponent's graveyard. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. So every turn, you get to exile a thing from a graveyard. It's kind of nice. So I like the sort of, again, graveyard hate mode on this, but the best thing about this, another form of Bitter Blossom. You know what I mean? We're not going to get it in this set. We've got Skrelv's Hive doing a poor imitation of it in Standard, but yet another card that just I'm a Bitter Blossom, but not really. And I guess I like that. I kind of like the idea in Standard of going like turn 2 Hive, turn 3 Skidder. What are you going to do? Block them. That's the thing. Probably just, I'm not really that worried about that. But I do like a guy. I do like a dude that puts a creature out every single turn. These can be sacrificed, bargained for, whatever you're trying to do. I like all that. Really, really good, again, for the Rats deck in Limited, obviously. Cool Rat Commander, although I think it's probably better for the 99 than as your commander, if I had to guess. There have to be better Rat Commander guys than this. Like an extra rat every turn, like kind of yawn when it comes to the stuff you could be doing in Commander, but he definitely goes in the 99. In Standard, we're working on a Rats deck. I don't remember the guy's name. I think it's Karamonix, the 3-mana rat. And when he ETBs, you look at the top X cards of your library. I think it's 5. And you get all the rats and you put them in your hand. That guy. That's probably a better Rat Commander, honestly. But we got that guy and this guy in Standard. We just got the Pied Piper, the Rakdos legend. I think it's whenever a creature dies, you get a 1/1 rat. That's also pretty sick. Also a very good Rat Commander that lets you play red too, so you probably just play that. But anyway, I'm getting ahead or behind myself. I'm not sure which one. But one way or the other, I do like this guy. I think that in the Rats deck in Standard, he's sweet. The Rats deck in the 99, a Commander, very sweet dude. So can't really crap on a card that makes a dude every turn. You're going to be doing something with that token. He's like a wedding announcement, but if rats showed up instead. He's not a wedding announcement. He's just not. The creature's not being able to block is just like really, it's not good. but still, I can't call this a bad card, right? I can't call this a bad card. Yama Dog, thanks for your tier 1 sub for 19 months. Yeah, these new cards do look interesting, if nothing else. Some of them look strong. You can tell that this is a strong looking set so far. When I'm looking at a card like Lord Skidder and I'm like, yeah, well, the thing is, the guy can't block, and I just do. It's a strong card, like pretty obviously. It's a pretty strong card. But we've seen a bunch of cards in the set that are strong enough that I'm like, yeah, whatever with this guy. That's how strong Standard looks at the moment. So let's move on after I take a little sip of the potion. Let's hit the 3-wheel motion. It is Likeness Looter here. This is 2 mana, a black and a blue for a 1/1 fairy shapeshifter with flying. You can tap it to draw a card and discard a card. That's nice. But you can also pay X to have Looter become a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with mana value X, except it has flying and this ability. Activate only as a sorcery. Bum, 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 bum. I feel like the activate is only as a sorcery isn't good, but does not make the card bad. I love that they even just called it Looter. It's a Merfolk Looter. These are just called Looters now. Here, fan base. So, 2 mana, 1/1 flying Looter with the proper creature type. Okay, we're already talking. Conversation being had. I'm interested. I'm leaning in. I want to hear what else you got to say. But also, it can just copy a guy. It can copy a guy. It can copy Obira. My heart's on fire. Obira. I think that's pretty okay, man. For just a couple of mana, this card looks sick, dude. I think that there's a world where this card could have been uncommon. I really do. But I totally get why it's a rare. Really sick. The sorcery thing kills it a little bit for me, but still a really solid looking Magic card, dude. Note that it doesn't have to copy a creature. Does not have to copy, a creature. It does have to copy a creature. Doesn't have to copy a fairy. Doesn't have to do that. Just copies a creature. So late in the game, I guess I'll copy my Shieldred. Why not? It has flying. Oh, by the way, it's been out for a couple of turns now, so I get to attack this turn. Is that okay? Oh, I guess I'll make a Graveyard Trespasser for 3 mana. Cool. I'll attack for 3 this turn with flying and eat a guy in your graveyard. Good Lord. This card looks pretty sick. I love that it can copy legendaries too. Like, there's a bunch of wacky stuff you can do with this too. Just a really, really solid card. That's why I looked at cards like this 3 mana guy. That's a 3/3, decent stats right there. Can play around in the graveyard. Makes a guy every turn. I look at him and I'm like, it's because we got cards like this. We got a flying merfolk looter that can become a Shelly when you want it to. Like, come on. It's ridiculous. No, this is a $5 card, $2. No, I don't think this card is worth more than a couple of bucks. I really don't think it is. I don't think this is a $10 card, but that's kind of what I like about it. But we'll wait. We'll see, baby. We'll see if this is just a standard player. This could be a massive player in historic, pioneer, modern. It's entirely possible that just the fact that this is a, again, like creature type free, copy any creature in your graveyard, that could be very, very good. I like this card an awful lot. I like it a lot. So let's see what's up. Werefox Bodyguard is next. Cards are very good, man. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 white for a 2/2 Fox Elf Knight with flash. When Werefox Bodyguard enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target non-Fox creature until Werefox Bodyguard leaves the battlefield. It's got 1 and a white, sacrifice it, you gain 2 life. So if you want to, you can target your own guy with flash to save your own guy. I think that's kind of interesting. If your dude gets targeted by removal, throw down Werefox Bodyguard, got yourself a 2/2, exile the dude, and then you can sacrifice the Bodyguard to gain 2 life, bring your dude back, or repeat and enter the battlefield trigger again. This is kind of a flickery sort of play. I like that about it. But also, just kind of not even on the basement, not even on the floor of it, just the another option is that it's just a brutal Cathar with flash. You know, it costs more white mana to play than a Cathar, but this is what we're used to paying for this card, like Fiend, Hunter, and stuff like that. Banisher Priest. Well, Banisher Priest, is that 2 and a white or 1 and 2 white? Now I can't remember. Anyway, 1 and 2 white is still totally fine to pay for this. Same stats as Brutal, only it has flash. It's an instant speed removal spell. Like, imagine if your opponent attacks with like a 3/3 and a 1/1. You know, they swing in with a 3/3 and a 1/1. So I'm going to Werefox Bodyguard away the 3/3 and block the 1/1. Like, what a beating. That's crazy. It's so good. But in the meantime, if you want to repeat enter the battlefield triggers on your own guys, you have that, and this allows you to gain some life. Like, block with it, like chump block with it, jump in front of something, sack it, gain 2 life, get my guy back. Like, this is a very strong Magic card, dude. This is a very, very strong Magic card. And yeah, it's a knight. They just can't target other Werefox Bodyguards because that might get weird, I guess. There's probably some sort of cracked thing you can do with it. But all in all, I mean, maybe there's a Fox in Standard that's going to be amazing and like this can't target it, so it sucks slightly more. But for the most part, I think that clause is there just so it can't target itself or other ones or whatever. So this is good, a real good card. By the way, if you're expecting Brutal Cathar to rotate out next, in a year, when we finally do get a rotation, and we're not going to have any more effects like that. First of all, we still have Annex Sentry, so we still have an effect like that. But now we're going to have this that has flash. It's even more annoying. And just so you know, if you play Standard, there will probably always be an effect like this in Standard. Wizards, I feel like we haven't gone a Standard without a card like this in like 10 years. So don't think you're getting away from it just because of rotation. That'll never save you. But still, just an incredibly powerful card in my eyes. Looks great. Flash. Can I start the preview over you just got here? Protein Boy? Sure. Let's go back. What even was the first card? I can't remember. We did commons. You don't want to be here for commons. Let's look at Virtue of Persistence next. We're getting very late into the spoilers, actually. Virtue of Persistence is 7 mana, 5 and 2 black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Jeez. And then Lockthwain Scorn is the adventure half. It's a sorcery. Target creature gets -3/-3 till end of turn. You gain 2 life. So nameless inversion, but I guess it's sorcery speed. There's been a few of these that give a creature -3/-3 for 2 mana. I think this card is cracked. Like, I think this card might be unbelievably good. 7 mana is a lot to ask. 7 mana is a lot to ask, especially in the mono black deck that like doesn't really ramp or anything. Like there are ramp decks that could pretty easily get to this. And they might play it too, Abzan ramp, Jund ramp, maybe maybe interested in something like this. We've already seen that this is a powerful ability on the enchantment app because we've seen like Portal to Phyrexia be pretty good, depending. Hasn't really established a foothold in Standard. Mostly because there's better stuff to ramp into, and most of it costs 7 mana, not 9, you know? This costs 7 mana, however, on the enchantment half. However, it just happens to be stapled to a fine removal spell. I'm not going to tell you this is a good removal spell, but I think in some situations, you're going to really like it. You know, like against mono red, I think I'd rather hold up an instant speed removal spell to kill the Reckless Storm Seeker the turn it comes down. Like a haste creature the turn it comes, the Thundering Raiju the turn it comes down, right? So I think you lose some value against some fast decks, obviously, if you want to play this card and not an instant speed removal spell. But of course, you're playing this on top of instant speed removal. Like just because you play this doesn't mean you're not playing Go for the Throat. Right? You are. But against some aggro decks, I think that 2-life turnaround is going to really matter. You know, like we saw in Vraska's Contempt a couple of years ago that card cost 4 mana to exile a creature or planeswalker, gain 2 life. And that 2 life mattered so much, like so often. When you're affecting the board state, life gain is okay. You know, when you're taking something away from your opponent and gaining a little bit of life back, sometimes that'll buy you a whole turn. Feels like a time walk, you know? And even though this one's sorcery speed, I still think this takes out probably what? 80% of the relevant creatures in Standard, you know? Not Shelly, not Tolarian Terror, not Haughty Djinn. It's kind of a lot. But not Adeline. Nearly every other creature that in Standard this kills. Like every important like plague creature in Standard. Rafine doesn't kill Rafine. But there are a ton of creatures this will just plow down. Worth noting, I guess, that it kills like Guardian of New Benalia and other indestructible stuff. I guess it's worth noting. But the 2-life, I think the 2-life is actually more important than you might realize. Again, we all played with Vraska's Contempt and enjoyed that. We enjoyed that an awful lot. So I like this card like so much, dude. 7 mana is a lot to ask, but again, you staple it to a fine removal spell. I think it becomes playable in Standard and beyond. I think it's really all these virtues so far, the virtue cycle. They all look very playable in a Commander as well. And this one's no different. I mean, there's obviously a broken ability in Commander. So I like this. I really do. I think that it'd be fun to hit off of a tally. You know, people hit, what is it? Beacon of the Multiverse? Is that what it's called? Behold the Multiverse, the 7 mana black spell that like bends 10 cards on both sides, and then you pick a creature from both graveyards, put it into play. People play that in a tally to hit it with a tally. I think that this might be better to hit with a tally. Although I guess the card I'm talking about puts 2 things into play immediately, which is usually better, you know. But still, at least it's worth pointing out. I think this is a great looking Magic card. Just super strong, dude. Yeah, these virtues do all seem to be pretty Ds. The blue one in Standard, I'm not like convinced about. That's the Panharmonicon one in blue. I think it might cost too much for Standard. And the adventure half is kind of really narrow, depending. But you know, I like the white one. I like the black one. So they do look. The blue one's really strong Commander though. I don't want to take that away from it. Be so much better if the adventure was an instant. Yeah, would have been broken. It would have been broken if the adventure app was an instant. That would be really good. You'd at least have to hack off the 2-life. You'd at least have to do that. It can't just be nameless inversion, but better. I mean, it can, but I like that it isn't. But let's move on here to Bramble Familiar. Apparently, this is our last card of the day, or at least so far. We're going to look at a few more cards. There's both new stuff. It's probably that I haven't even seen yet since I reloaded Mythic Spoiler and started the stream. So there's a few new cards I want to go through, and then there's some of the enchanted tales that I want to run through before we're done with stream. But Bramble Familiar is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 2/2 elemental raccoon that taps for a green mana, or you can pay 1 and a green and tap it and discard a card to return Bramble Familiar to its owner's hand. For some reason, there's not a period at the end of this. It's just kind of floating there. Return Bramble Familiar to its owner's hand. Huh? That's kind of an odd printing. I wonder if it will come without a period. I wonder if that'll happen. I've just now noticed that. That's why I'm hyper focusing on it. But anyway, I do like that they gave it a familiar ability. It's a Bramble Familiar, so it's got the Urtai's familiar ability where it can return to your hand. But anyway, Find the Way is the adventure half of it. 7 mana, 5 and 2 green for a sorcery. Mill 7 cards, put a creature, enchantment, or land card from among the milled cards this way onto the battlefield. So this reminds me of, you guys remember the Zendikar lands that if you wanted them to come into play untapped, they cost you 3 life. But on the other side of them, they were all like a really big bomby spell. The green one. Symbiosis. Turn Timber Symbiosis. Something like that. Something Timber Symbiosis. It feels a little bit like this card. The sorcery half of this. However, I think this hits more stuff. I want to say Symbiosis only hit creatures. This hits enchantments or lands too. Although, it would suck to pay 7 mana for this and hit a land. Unless it's, your deck is super specialized to hit a specific land, then maybe. But you mill 7, that's kind of worth it in certain decks that just want to mill themselves, right? But, hopefully by the time you're able to spend 7 mana, your self-mill deck has gotten set up. Still, it's worth noting. Self-mill is cool. But I do like this. I think that a lot like the last card that was just like a fine removal spell, stapled to a big, dumb, stupid effect that like wins the game. This is like a fine like mana dork guy. Stapled again to a big, dumb win the game effect. Seems good, man. That seems great. We're seeing like a Gruul Etali deck shape up, I think, where Etali isn't the only thing it ramps into. We saw Thunderous debut the other day, which is like a tooth and nail. It feels like a tooth and nail a little bit. And I feel like you'd ramp into that and hit Etali, and Etali hits something else, or hits it again. Just cast it again. I want to do stuff like that. And this looks like it might be good in that deck too, right? Like it ramps, and then you return it to your hand when you have mana and just like try to hit the Etali that way. That seems cool, but all things considered, it's 2 mana for a 2/2 guy that taps for green, so he's just good. He's just fine. He's a fine guy. You can do his return him to your hand ability at instant speed to save him from removal. That's kind of neat, but obviously you're doing that to when you can finally cast the sorcery half of it. Cool thing to note here is that it cycles, right? You can play it on turn 2, get some mana, put it in your hand, cast the sorcery half of it, and then like the adventure half of it, and then cast the creature half again. And just do it again. Return it to your hand. Find the way again. Really, if the game goes long, dude, this guy will grind with you. So that's awesome. One thing, too, I want to point out is that we're about to go into a set that has a bunch of little animals, right? I forget what it's called, but it's like beginning of next year. One of the first standard sets we're going to get is this set that's focused entirely on animals. There's no humans or like humanoids on the plane. And raccoon, that's a creature type. I tried to highlight it. That's a creature type to look out for to be relevant on that plane, right? So... And we get mice, too. We get mice in this set. That I want to point out that those might be important once we get to that set, too. But all things considered, just a sweet package here, man. 2 mana, 2/2 mana dork is already, like, kind of fine. That's just kind of fine. Returns to your hand, that's kind of fine. You cast the sorcery part, you win the game. That's more than fine. Just a sweet card. Trash Panda, let's go. Yeah. Man, this is actually a very, very sick card. In my opinion, we saw at least 3, 4, 5 even incredibly playable cards today, and that's just in the stuff I know we got. So I guess, yeah, I'll cut you loose, YouTube viewers. I'm here. Here's the outro. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.